gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God, forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Then Jesus told his disciples, If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The gospel of our Savior.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Every good Disney movie has a good villain, right? Someone who is so good at being so bad. Someone who adds some tension to the story. Perhaps you remember the villain in Disney's 2009 animated feature film, The Princess and the Frog. Anyone? Seen that movie? Anyone? Princess and the Frog. At 8 o'clock, nobody had seen it. So hold your hands high if you have seen The Princess and the Frog. Thank you. Okay, like 5 of you. 8 of you. Okay, good. I'll explain a little bit, but I'm not going to spoil the story so that the rest of us can go and watch it. So in the 2009 Disney film, The Princess and the Frog, Dr. Facilier, commonly known as the Shadow Man, is the villain. And Dr. Facilier, the name sounds like easy, right? In Spanish or French or Latin, facile, is an evil, smooth-talking voodoo witch doctor who plots to rule New Orleans with help from his friends on the other side. The Shadow Man manipulates our protagonist, Tiana, showing her an easier path, tempting her with voodoo magic, scaring her with it, as he plots his own game. He plays on Tiana's dreams, desires, and experiences, which are all good. He plays on that as he says to her, and I cannot do the character justice, but I'm going to try a little. Come on now, darling. Think of everything you sacrificed. Think of all those naysayers who doubted you. And don't forget your poor daddy. Now that was one hard-working man, double, sometimes triple shifts. Never letting on that bone, tired and beat down, he really was. Shame all that hard work didn't amount to much more than a busted up old gumbo pot and a dream that never got off the back porch. But you can give your poor daddy everything he ever wanted. Come on, Tiana, you're almost there. Everything the Shadow Man says to Tiana has some truth in it, some empathy, some understanding of her, and yet it pulls her toward danger. In our text for Matthew's gospel today, we have some tension. Some tension that has popped up between Jesus and Peter. The appearance of, we'll call it a villainous voice, a force that is playing on Peter's deepest dreams and desires and experiences. We have Peter, who has empathy and love for Jesus, trying to get out in front and take the lead, moving towards some dangerous territory. Last week, you'll remember that Peter pointed at Jesus and said, "It's you, you're the Messiah." He knew the identity of Jesus last Sunday, just last week. This week, it's a little different. Last week, Jesus pointed back at Peter and said, you are the rock on which I will build my church. This movement of love and belonging and renewed hope for the world. And this week, it's a little different. Jesus says something else. This week, Jesus is expanding on how he will enact this movement, which includes a violent end to his life. And Peter, understandably, I would say, wants the story to go in a different direction. And Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, Satan is a form of the word in Hebrew, Hasatan. Hasatan, it's a shortened form of that, Satan, Hasatan. And Hasatan is the person who stands up in a courtroom and says, "That's the person who did it." They are the accuser in a courtroom. It's a real thing in a courtroom in the Hebrew language world. Another word we could use for Satan is tempter. Get behind me, accuser. Get behind me, tempter. I imagine Hasatan, the accuser, the tempter, as a force like the shadow man, manipulating us where we have good dreams and real experiences, getting in there and twisting our desires into words that deceive us into choosing some easy way. Deceiving us into getting out in front of Jesus as though we know better than Jesus. For followers of Jesus, folks like us, life is always filled with moments of realignment. Getting back behind Jesus when we have rushed out in front. The good news is that God is always calling us back into realignment, back into a space where we can follow Jesus. It is our task to trust that where Jesus leads us is a place that we want to go, a place of truth and beauty, peace and flourishing. To trust that when we get behind Jesus, we will follow the one who leads us to a better way. Not always an easier way, a better way. A way that brings light and life to all. We also have the story this morning of Moses. Moses who followed God's call, realigning his whole life to follow where God led him. Now, I'm pretty sympathetic to both Peter and Moses in our text today. Moses was having a bit of an identity crisis. He was raised in the court of Pharaoh by Pharaoh's daughter, yet he was born into a community of enslaved Hebrews. He witnessed the oppression of these enslaved people, his own relatives, and in reaction to the violence that he witnessed against those enslaved relatives, he gave in to violence, and he killed an Egyptian. And then he runs off into the wilderness to avoid punishment. And he survived in the wilderness by joining in with the Midianite people, marrying the daughter of a Midian priest, a priest of Midian. And so he doesn't really know who he is. Is he somebody who follows the God of the Hebrews? Is he somebody who follows the God of the Egyptians? Or the gods of the Egyptians? Is he someone who follows the religion of the Midianites? And then this day of decision comes when he sees a bush that is burning but it's not consumed. And Moses gets really curious, and he gets close, not too close, it is fire, but he gets close to that bush. And he's so curious about what's happening, why it doesn't disappear. And in that moment of curiosity, he pauses long enough to hear the voice of God. The voice of God that is calling him to follow. And what does he do? He has two questions. He protests. He says, who am I? There's the identity crisis, right? Who am I? And who are you? Who are you, God? Who's this voice? After asking those questions, Moses becomes the leader of an oppressed people who learn to follow God. And let's be clear, following God means trusting God. And these people that he leads out of Egypt learn to trust God. They learn to trust themselves and one another as God's people. And he leads them out from oppression, out of manipulation by the lies of Pharaoh and his leaders. They face their own temptations to even return to Egypt, to what was violent, because they missed the order and organization of it when they're in the wilderness. And they turn towards true freedom, life with God, life in community where there would be dignity for every human being, where there would also be hard work and hard things, yes, hard things. And also, there would be fulfillment and flourishing, and God's beloved people to share the burdens. There is a part in each of us, perhaps a villainous voice, that wants to find the easy way. Right? Are you with me on that? And we relate to Moses and the people he led out of Egypt, to Peter, talking back to Jesus this morning. There is this part in us, this voice that wants an easy way, that wants some shadow man to come in with magic and make it happen faster, to find a shortcut from enslavement to the promised land and all that good milk and honey without going through the wilderness, to skip over the part where Jesus is killed violently on a cross and just get to the glory of the resurrection. Like Peter and Moses, we might even protest when God calls us. There is this voice that lures us, a tempter, an accusing voice that says all sorts of deceptive and manipulative words to us, lies to us with words like, who do you think you are? You've messed up. You've done too much wrong. Or that says to us, you're smarter than everyone else. The rules don't actually apply to you. Go ahead. Do it your own way. Many years ago, and Dave will remember this story, Dave and I were heading to the zoo for a fun day of looking at the animals with a friend, who for the purposes of today's sermon we'll call Frank. We were headed to the zoo with Frank. Frank had visited us from cross country and was driving his own car so we could go on to somewhere else after the zoo. And as we hopped into our cars, Dave told him to stay right behind us. This was before cell phones, if you can imagine that. Before cell phones. Remember following people in their car like that? So Dave says, stay right behind us, we'll be in the zoo in no time. Frank smiles and sang a line from that old familiar song, I will follow you. Famous last words. Frank, as he followed us, became frustrated with traffic and zoomed out from behind us to go faster. He brilliantly managed to get out of a traffic tangle, only to lose our vehicle. Many, many hours later, he found his way to the zoo and found us, sheepish that he could not resist his urge to get out in front, that he could not restrain himself and follow. Sometimes we get so frustrated with things happening around us that we dart out in front only to find that we have lost the leader. We have lost the one who knows the way. We have outsmarted the traffic only to find ourselves alone and lost. We have listened to the villainous voice rather than following following God's call in a situation. There's no need to be sheepish about it. We all do it. It's part of being human. There's no need to feel bad, to spend hours lost and looking. God is always as near to us as our own heart. The one who is leading us is burning like a bush that can never be consumed within our hearts, inside of us, always grabbing our attention, calling us in, saying, follow me. God understands our mistakes, our desire to leave, and shows us how to realign again and again and again. God is always, with great love, directing us to realign our lives behind the love and wisdom of Jesus, to get behind Jesus, and to follow where God's love is leading us.